I at least wanted to mention that all of the Mac Studio displays are the reviews are coming in, and they're all over YouTube now. So I'm sure you guys have all seen some of them. But if I had to summarize the takeaways, I would probably summarize it the way, I hate to admit this, the way The Verge is, and that is Mac Studio, thumbs up, Studio Display, thumbs down. I wouldn't say that I'm a solid thumbs down on the Studio Display, but if you guys caught my my bit last week about what the Studio Display actually is, and just to summarize, I was close. I was a little bit off. I was comparing it to the M1 iMac and how they had basically just increased the resolution from 4.5K to 5K and then increased the size from 24 inches to 27 inches. You're literally getting an iMac without the Mac part for a higher price. But that's not quite right. What is more true is it's literally the 27-inch iMac, the 5K display from the 27-inch iMac in a M1 iMac body that's a little larger, and then they raise the price on you, and that's pretty much what it is. So I think a lot of people are kind of in agreement that the Studio Display is beautiful, and it's uniquely Apple. It's built very well. It has that aesthetic that we all love. It has the built-in speakers. It works perfectly with your Mac Studio, but it's not worth $1,600. I mean, I mentioned this last week. I got a discount on mine. Thankfully, it was a substantial discount. I'll just put it that way, and it really helped me make the purchase. But so I ended up getting the Studio Display at $1,200. Even at $1,200, I was like, I'm not really sure, because you can get the LG Ultrafine 5K, which is pretty much the same display quality, and it's minus some of the features that you get from Apple for $1,300. But you can get that display for, $1,000 to $1,100 if you know where to look. And I think that's what Apple was going off of when they priced their Studio Display. They were pricing it off of the LG Ultrafine, and there's just not a lot of 5K displays out there, period, at 27 inches or any other size. So Apple's got a unique resolution, especially when you consider that it's Retina quality. So they just don't have a lot of competition in that space. But if you don't need 5K, I think the consensus is you can get an HDR monitor that's 4K for a cheaper price and a larger screen, and be perfectly happy. So if you don't have a specific use case or need for 5K, you'd probably be better off getting a 4K display. It will be cheaper. You can get one that's larger. It may not have all the bells and whistles, but it's gonna be a lot less expensive, and you'll probably be pretty happy with it. The only thing I would caution against is Mac OS doesn't render text extremely well at less than Retina qualities. So your text may not look the best, but I think for a lot of people, they may not even notice. So it's up to you. I'm just going to give you the information. Do with that what you want. I have pre-ordered the Studio Display. I'm waiting to get my hands on it, and I'll make my decision once I've had the chance to try it out. But the thing about all these reviews is you got to keep in mind that Apple is really smart about YouTube these days. They send out these products to all of these reviewers early, and all these people will always say, oh, I got the product for free, but it doesn't influence my opinion at all. Yeah, dude. I'm a product reviewer. I will tell you the truth. It does impact your opinion. Because in the back of your mind, well, for two reasons. One, you didn't have to pay for it, right? It's much more painful if you buy something. And
well, these a lot of the professional reviewers, they return them. They return the product. It's not theirs. They don't get it to keep. It's not free.
That's true.
It's lent to.
That's true. But I guess my point being, like, if you had paid for it, and you found something that you didn't like, you would really be unhappy because now you're out the money, right?
I think it's the other way. I think a lot of people who pay for something, they bend over backwards to justify their purchase. I mean, how many times how many times you go to the movie theater and you hate the movie, but you're going to sit through it because you just spent, $16 on the ticket and another $20 on candy and rubbish, so you're determined to get your money's worth. I think that definitely happens with people who buy stuff. I mean, they try to ignore the defects because they don't want to feel like they got ripped off.
That's interesting because I feel like for me, I hate when I spend money on something and it ends up not living up to the standard I had expected it to live up to. And
Right.
then I'm very vocal about that,
Well, if it's a real lemon, yeah, for sure. You can, yeah, but if it's like, if there's a few flaws, if there's a few things that you don't like, I think you tend to sort of ignore that stuff. I mean, not in every case, but often, I just think the logic is the opposite. I think if someone's getting something for free, they don't value it at all.
Yeah, well, the other thing about getting these reviews or getting these review units, and even if they have to return them, and I don't mean to cachet to any of these people, I would probably do the exact same thing, but it's access journalism, right? Like, in the back of your mind, if you really lay into something, if there's a really serious problem and you're like, this is a big deal, you are more inclined to temper your actual feedback about a product or your actual opinion about a product, because if you're too harsh on it, then you probably won't get access again in the future. And these people's channels depend on getting early access to products because they get the product before anyone else. Everyone wants to know what to think about the Mac Studio or the Studio Display, and so they go to your channel to hear your opinion. And YouTube is so competitive these days that getting this early access is literally gold. I mean, it just gets you tons of clicks. So again, I'm not criticizing any of these people. I would do the exact same thing. I just think that you got to keep that in mind when you're watching the reviews, because the reviews are going to be positive, and that's why Apple does it. They want to fill YouTube with positive reviews of their products so that people go out and buy the products. I think the real reviews are going to come in the next 30 to 60 days. Yes, Leonard.
Well, having said that, I think a lot of the early reviews of the Studio Display are pretty fair. I think people point out that it's an older display, that it's pretty pricey, and that it has a few shortcomings. You're not getting an XDR display here. But then again, like Malik had an interesting piece about the display, saying that this thing is actually sort of basically a mini computer with its own processor, and it's running some sort of custom iOS type operating system, which isn't iOS, but it's it does a lot of processing for the speakers, for doing spatial audio. You can AirPlay to it when the computer's asleep. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, like, it's almost it doesn't do a whole bunch of stuff, but it sort of sits independently of the machine. So you're whatever you've got plugged into it can be totally asleep, and you can still use the display because it's got its own chip. And he's saying that this is like a glimpse of the future, like where a lot of everything's going to get a chip, everything's going to get a display. This is also like AR and VR, like a precursor to that, because it's going to be, they're doing all this spatial and 3D, sound and visual computing on the display. So even though it's an older display, he still likes it. He uses an XDR display and said that this thing is like, even it's nowhere near the quality of the XDR. But look at the price difference. For the money, he thinks it's still a good deal, which I thought that made me feel
when
better.
you compare it to the Pro XDR, I mean, of course it's gonna feel like a good deal because they got you price anchored at $5,000, and you're like, this one's only $1,600. But I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I'm looking at it from what can you get in the monitor world for $1,600? There's a lot of monitors out there that have features that are going to be better for video editing, and that's the perspective that I'm looking at this from, than this particular monitor. This monitor doesn't do HDR. It doesn't have ProMotion. I mean, there's just a lot of things that it seems like it's missing for that price tag. It's only 27 inches. Like, you get a 32-inch 4K monitor for way less money, and it won't have the polish of this monitor for sure, but it's going to be a beautiful display, and it may cost a third of the price. So it depends on what you need.
Right. Yeah.
But when you think about it in terms of, well, the Pro XDR is $5,000, it's like, okay. And speaking to the whole, it has an A13 chip inside. People are impressed with that. I honestly think that's kind of unimportant. It's erroneous. It's like, if you have a Mac, any Mac can process. Well, let me rephrase this. Any new Mac can give you the capabilities that the A13 chip in this display is giving you, it seems to me. So the only reason that an A13 is present in this monitor is because Apple wants to make Hey Siri and the really super high quality FaceTime camera, computational HDR and all that stuff available to older Macs. So it will enable those features on older Macs, because a newer Mac can do that without having an A13 chip to run that stuff, right? Like, if you plugged your newer Mac into this monitor or into any monitor, you still have Hey Siri. I'm sorry, I'm saying it to everyone. Sorry, forgive me. Hey, you know who capabilities. So it seems like you're paying for a feature that a lot of people may not necessarily be using because they have a newer Mac. That's the way it seems to me. Anyway, I don't mean to bag on the Studio Display. Look, my you know who is now going crazy. It's all listening to me. Here, I'll solve it for you guys. Stop. There it goes. I solved all your problems. What's that? Yes, Leander.
No. So what about the Mac Studio?
Mac Studio. Everyone loves it. I mean, it's ridiculously overpowered. And in fact, that's been the thing about the M1 Ultra that everyone has said so far. It's like almost unanimous. Is it's more power than you need. It's more power than you'll probably ever use. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm okay with that. Like I don't mind having that extra power that I probably won't use for 1 or 2 years. I mean, that's the whole point of it. And if you use Final Cut Pro, it's going to be a dream machine for you. It's just going to, because Final Cut Pro will take advantage of all the extra cores and give you that time savings because you have all that extra computational power. And there's a lot of benchmarks in all these reviews. I won't dive into all of them right now. You guys can go and watch them yourself. But if you are a video editor or you're doing a lot of image editing or something like that, then these extra cores are probably going to benefit you in a big way. In fact, you probably won't even get close to maxing out this machine anytime soon because it's just way more power than even high volume YouTube creators need at this point, which I was surprised to find out. I thought surely someone like MKBHD or someone who's creating like really high end videos, high pixel videos, long videos is going to be able to max this machine out. And even creators like that are getting nowhere near the capabilities of the Mac Studio. So I'm super excited for mine. The one thing I will mention is 2 things about the Mac Studio that you probably would want to know is, first of all, the HDMI port on the back is only HDMI 2.0. So if you have a higher refresh rate display, the Mac Studio won't be able to power that higher refresh rate. It's locked at 60 hertz. So there's that for you. So even if the Studio display was ProMotion, the Mac Studio couldn't take advantage of that extra refresh rate because
is that what people are using then? The HDMI port? You wouldn't want to plug it into a Thunderbolt port?
Oh, you know what? That's actually a good point. Yeah. So if you're using a Thunderbolt port, I'm not sure what capability that has for refresh rate. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. I'm not sure why.
I figured the HDMI was like for outputting it to a TV or something like that.
You're right. You're right. So if you plug it into Thunderbolt port, I'm glad that you brought that up. It probably is a lot higher. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anyone speak to that. The other thing I would mention is it seems like the amount of power you get out of the M1 Max in the Mac Studio is actually higher than the MacBook Pro. And credit to Max Tech for talking about this, is when you're looking at the keynotes between the M1 Max in the MacBook Pro and the M1 Max in the Mac Studio, the Mac Studio M1 Max is using more power, which is interesting. Why would it use more power? Well, to me, that indicates that's because they're able to run it at a faster clock, so they have to give it more power, and they're able to cool it better. So you get more power out of an M1 Max in the Mac Studio than you do in the MacBook Pro. Now, that's not confirmed. I'm not totally sure if that's going to be the case, but that looks to be the case at this point, which is really interesting. That means that they are nerfing the Mac Studio or the M1 Max in the MacBook Pro because they just can't cool it well enough to really give you all the power that chip is capable of. So I'll be really curious to see when the benchmarks come out of the M1 Max Mac Studio versus the M1 Max MacBook Pro. I can't believe I said that without fumbling over my words.
Right, exactly. Impressive.
Does that make sense? So It looks like if you get the M1 Max, not only, or in the Mac Studio, not only is it going to cost you less than it would be if it were in the MacBook Pro, but it might actually be faster, which would be pretty insane. I mean, that would just increase the value even more because I think I said last week, an M1 Max Mac Studio is $2,400, and the same power in the MacBook Pro is $3,500. Now you get a lot more with the MacBook Pro. You get the display, the keyboard, and everything, right? So there's more to it. But if you just need the power and you already have a keyboard and you already have a display, then the M1 Mac Studio is a really great deal because you're getting the same power, possibly even more, for $1,000 less.